Husband announced divorce at our anniversary party, but regretted at the moment I took the stage. They say love makes you blind, but betrayal? That gives you perfect vision. My name is Maya Richardson, and for 12 years, I believed I was living the American dream. Married to Dominic Richardson, the golden boy of Silicon Valley's tech scene, living in our glass-walled mansion overlooking San Francisco Bay. From the outside, we were the perfect power couple, him with his charming smile and smooth presentations, me with my MBA, and what everyone called that brilliant mind for strategy. But here's what nobody saw. I was the engine running his entire operation while he got all the credit for being the face. I used to own a successful consulting firm before I met Dominic. Richardson Strategic Solutions. I'd built it from nothing, helping startups navigate their early growth phases. My clients loved me because I could see 3 moves ahead when everyone else was still figuring out move 1. But when Dominic's first company started taking off, he convinced me to take a step back so I could really support his vision. "Babe, you're so good at this behind-the-scenes stuff," he'd say, kissing my forehead like I was a child. "Let me handle the spotlight. You handle the strategy." So I sold my firm, became Mrs. Richardson, started managing his calendar, reviewing his contracts, and basically running his life while he collected the applause. I told myself it was temporary, that we were building something together, that partnership meant sacrifice. I was such a fool. The first crack in my fairy tale came 3 months ago when Dominic started acting strange. He'd always been busy, but this was different. Phone calls he'd take in the other room. Emergency meetings that lasted until 2 a.m. Business trips that came up suddenly and couldn't be delayed. "It's just the new project, Maya," he'd say when I asked. "You know how it is in the early stages." But I did know how it was in the early stages. I'd helped him through 4 successful launches. This felt different. This felt like secrets. So I did what any smart woman would do. I started paying attention. I noticed the way he'd flip his phone face down when I entered the room. How he'd started password protecting his laptop, something he'd never done before. The new cologne he wore to client meetings. The way he'd come home energized instead of exhausted, like he'd been somewhere that filled him up instead of drained him. And then there were the financial irregularities. See, even though I'd stepped back from my own career, I never stopped being smart about money. I managed our household finances, and I'd always kept an eye on our joint accounts. But suddenly, there were transfers I didn't recognize. Large sums moving to accounts I'd never seen before. When I asked Dominic about them, he'd wave me off. "Investment opportunities, babe. Nothing you need to worry about." Nothing I needed to worry about. As if I hadn't spent 10 years helping him make every major financial decision in his life. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I hired a private investigator, not some seedy character from a movie, but a professional woman who specialized in corporate investigations. What she found made my blood run cold. Dominic wasn't just having an affair. He was systematically moving our money into a new startup he'd co-founded with his business partner, Camille Torres. 26 years old, Stanford MBA, and apparently the love of his life. They'd been together for 8 months, and their company, NextGen Analytics, was being funded almost entirely by money Dominic had diverted from our joint accounts. Our joint accounts. Money I'd earned, money I'd saved, money that was supposed to be ours. But here's where the story gets interesting. You see, I'd never completely stopped being Maya Richardson, strategic consultant. Even after I sold my firm, I'd kept some of my connections, including a relationship with the Hartwell Foundation, a private investment trust that specialized in funding innovative startups. The foundation had approached me 2 years ago about serving as an anonymous advisor. They liked my track record, and they wanted someone who could evaluate potential investments without the politics that came with having a public face. I'd said yes partly because I missed the work, and partly because I liked having something that was just mine. So when NextGen Analytics came across my desk 6 months ago, I was intrigued. The business plan was solid, the market research was thorough, and the projections were ambitious but realistic. I had no idea Dominic was involved. The paperwork listed Camille Torres as the primary contact, and there was no mention of any other partners. I recommended the investment. The foundation approved a $2.3 million funding round. I had been unknowingly funding my husband's affair. But that wasn't even the most interesting part. The most interesting part was what I discovered when I started reading the fine print of the contracts Camille had signed. She'd been so eager to get the funding that she'd agreed to some very unusual terms. Terms that gave the Hartwell Foundation, and by extension me, significant control over the company's operations. Terms that I'd specifically designed to protect investors from being shut out by ambitious founders. Terms that meant I now owned a controlling stake in the company my husband was using to betray me. As I sat in my home office, looking out at the bay where Dominic and I used to take evening walks, I realized something had shifted inside me. The woman who had spent 12 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient, she was gone. In her place was someone I'd forgotten existed. The woman who'd built her own company from nothing. The woman who never backed down from a fight. Dominic thought he was so clever, moving in the shadows, planning his escape. But he'd forgotten something crucial about shadows. They belong to the light. And I was about to show him exactly how bright I could shine. Our anniversary party was in 3 days. He'd insisted we throw it, said it would be good for appearances with his investors and clients. He had no idea that I'd already spoken to several of those investors. He had no idea that I'd been invited to speak at the party. And he definitely had no idea that I'd been planning my own surprise for weeks. The mouse was about to roar. The night of our anniversary party, I stood in front of my walk-in closet holding 2 dresses. One was the soft pink Valentino that Dominic had bought me last Christmas. Safe, sweet, forgettable. The other was a deep emerald silk number I'd purchased for myself, but never worn. He'd seen it hanging there and called it too bold for me. Tonight, bold was exactly what I needed. I slipped into the emerald dress and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the quiet, supportive wife who'd been fading into the background for 12 years. She was Maya Richardson, the woman who'd built a company from scratch. The woman who'd just spent 3 weeks orchestrating the most elegant takedown in Silicon Valley history. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, Patricia Chen. Everything's in place. Divorce papers filed this morning. Board meeting scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m. You sure you're ready for this? I typed back. I was born ready. Downstairs, our house was transforming into Party Central. The catering staff Dominic had hired was setting up in the garden. White tables under string lights, a champagne fountain, a small stage where he planned to make his special announcement. He told me it was going to be a surprise tribute to our marriage. What a joke. I walked into the kitchen where Dominic was adjusting his tie in the reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator. He looked handsome in his navy suit, the same suit I'd helped him pick out for his first big investor meeting 5 years ago. For a moment, I felt a stab of something that might have been grief for what we used to be. Then I remembered the bank statements. You look beautiful, he said, turning to me with that smile that used to make my heart race. Now it just made me angry. That dress is different. I thought it was time for a change. Something flickered across his face. Uncertainty? Guilt. But it was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Maya, about tonight. He started, then stopped. About the announcement I'm making.
I want you to know that.
That what, Dom? I kept my voice light, curious. That you're going to surprise me? He nodded, relief flooding his features. He thought I was still clueless. Still the trusting wife who believed whatever he told her. Something like that. Just know that I care about you, okay? No matter what happens. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. Instead, I kissed his cheek and whispered, I know exactly what's going to happen tonight. The guests started arriving at 7. Silicon Valley royalty, mostly venture capitalists, tech founders, the kind of people who measured their worth in unicorn startups and IPO exits. I played the perfect hostess, greeting everyone with champagne and small talk, while my mind ran through my checklist. Camille Torres arrived at 7:30. I watched her from across the garden as she made her entrance. She was beautiful in that effortless way young women often are, long dark hair, perfect skin, wearing a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She moved through the crowd with confidence, shaking hands and laughing at jokes, completely unaware that she was walking into a trap. What fascinated me was watching her with Dominic. They were so careful not to seem too familiar, but I caught the little moments. The way his hand lingered on her waist when he introduced her to someone, how she touched his arm when she laughed, the way they found each other across the room like magnets. They thought they were being so clever. At 8 o'clock, I made my way to where Camille was standing with a group of investors, discussing market trends in artificial intelligence. She was smart, I had to give her that. Her analysis was sharp, her insights thoughtful. Under different circumstances, I might have liked her. "Camille," I said, joining their circle. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Maya Richardson." She turned to me with a bright smile that faltered just slightly when she saw my face. "Mrs. Richardson, of course. Thank you so much for hosting tonight. Your home is gorgeous." "Thank you. I understand you're doing incredible work with NextGen Analytics. Dominic can't stop talking about your partnership." The word partnership hung in the air between us. Her smile became more forced. "Yes, we work very well together. The company has been a real passion project." "I can imagine. It must be exciting to have such dedicated backing from your investors. The Hartwell Foundation, isn't it?" This time, her composure cracked completely. The color drained from her face. Yes. They've been wonderful to work with." "Oh, I'm so glad to hear that," I said sweetly. "I'll have to pass along your compliments." Before she could respond, Dominic appeared at my elbow. "Ladies, sorry to interrupt, but I think it's time for the toast." Perfect timing, as always. He guided me toward the small stage, his hand on my back, whispering in my ear about how much this night meant to him. The guests gathered around, champagne glasses raised, faces expectant. Dominic stepped up to the microphone, and I watched him transform into the charismatic performer I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. "Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate 12 amazing years with my beautiful wife, Maya." Applause. Smiles. A few ahs from the crowd. "Marriage is about partnership," he continued, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. "It's about supporting each other's dreams, even when that means making difficult choices." This was it. This was the moment he was going to destroy me in front of everyone we knew. "Which is why," he said, his voice growing stronger, "I have an announcement to make." The crowd leaned forward. I felt Camille's eyes on me from across the garden. "Maya and I have decided that this will be our last anniversary party, because tomorrow morning I'll be filing for divorce."
Gasps.
Shocked whispers. Someone dropped their champagne glass, but I just smiled and started walking toward the stage.
It was showtime.
The garden had gone completely silent except for the soft jazz music still playing from the speakers. 80 of Silicon Valley's most influential people stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, staring at me as I walked calmly toward the stage. I could feel their eyes on me, some pitying, some curious, all waiting for the breakdown they expected. The crying, the begging, the desperate plea for my husband to reconsider. Instead, I smiled. "Excuse me, darling," I said to Dominic, gently taking the microphone from his suddenly slack grip. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." His face had gone pale, confusion replacing the confident smirk he'd worn just moments before. "Maya, what are you?" "Please," I said sweetly, placing my hand on his arm. "Let me clarify a few things for our guests." I turned to face the crowd, and something interesting happened. The woman who had spent 12 years making herself smaller, quieter, more convenient, she vanished completely. In her place stood the Maya Richardson who had built $1 million consulting firm before she was 30. The Maya Richardson who could command a boardroom with nothing but her voice and her vision. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice carrying easily across the silent garden, "my husband is absolutely right about one thing. This is indeed our last anniversary party." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I caught sight of Camille near the back, her face white as paper. But before we move on to new chapters, I think it's important to celebrate some recent successes, particularly the incredible work being done by NextGen Analytics. Dominic's head snapped toward me. "Maya, Such an innovative company, I continued, ignoring him completely. Founded by the brilliant Camille Torres. I gestured toward her, and every head in the garden turned to look. She looked like she wanted to disappear into the ground. With the strategic partnership of my dear husband, Dominic. The crowd was confused now. This wasn't the script they'd expected. Divorce announcements didn't usually include business presentations. The fascinating thing about NextGen Analytics, I said, beginning to pace across the small stage like I was giving a TED Talk, is how they secured their funding. It's quite a story, actually. Dominic tried to cut in again. This isn't the time or place. Oh, but it's the perfect time, I said, turning to him with a smile that could cut glass. After all, our guests are investors themselves. They appreciate a good funding story. I looked back at the crowd, many of whom were now leaning forward with interest. Money stories always captured their attention. You see, NextGen Analytics received a substantial investment from the Hartwell Foundation 6 months ago. $2.3 million, to be exact. The foundation was impressed by the business plan, the market research, the growth projections. They were particularly impressed by the dedication of the founders. Camille made a small sound that might have been a whimper. Now, here's where it gets interesting. I continued, warming to my theme. The Hartwell Foundation operates through anonymous advisors, successful business professionals who evaluate potential investments without the complications that come with public involvement. I paused, letting the silence stretch. Dominic's breathing had become audible. I've been one of those anonymous advisors for 2 years now. A few people in the crowd began to look confused. Then understanding started to dawn on their faces, one by one, like lights turning on across the garden. That's right, I said, my voice growing stronger. I personally recommended the investment in NextGen Analytics. I championed their cause to the foundation's board. I am the reason they received their funding. Dominic looked like he was about to be sick. But wait, I said, raising one finger like I was just remembering something important. There's more. I reached into my small clutch purse. Thank God for designers who understood that women needed pockets, and pulled out a folded document. You see, in my enthusiasm to support NextGen Analytics, I had the foundation's lawyers draft some very specific contract terms. Terms designed to protect our investment from, shall we say, internal complications. I unfolded the document slowly, letting the tension build. Ms. Torres, in her eagerness to secure funding, signed an agreement that includes some interesting clauses. For instance, any attempt to transfer company assets without foundation approval results in immediate forfeiture of voting rights. Camille's knees buckled slightly. Someone near her caught her arm. Any undisclosed partnerships or relationships between founders that could represent conflicts of interest also trigger penalty clauses. And any misrepresentation of the funding source. I looked directly at Dominic, who was now gripping the edge of the stage so hard his knuckles had gone white. Well, that results in immediate transfer of controlling interest to the foundation. The silence was deafening. Even the jazz music seemed to have stopped, though that might have been my imagination. Now, I have here documented evidence that company funds have been commingled with personal accounts, that there was indeed an undisclosed personal relationship between the co-founders, and that at least $600,000 of the foundation's investment was actually money transferred from joint accounts belonging to Dominic and me. Someone in the crowd gasped. I think it might have been Patricia Chun, my lawyer, who had arrived fashionably late and was now standing near the back with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Which means, I said, folding the document and slipping it back into my purse, that as of this morning, I am the majority owner of NextGen Analytics. Dominic finally found his voice. That's impossible. You can't. Actually, I can. And I have. I turned back to our guests, many of whom were now staring in fascination rather than pity. The beautiful thing about being underestimated is that people forget to read the fine print. I handed the microphone back to my husband, whose mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. Now then, I said brightly, stepping down from the stage. Who'd like more champagne? For about 10 seconds, nobody moved. The garden was suspended in that strange moment between shock and reaction, like the pause before thunder after lightning strikes. Then chaos erupted. Guests started talking all at once, some laughing in disbelief, others pulling out their phones to frantically text or call their own lawyers. A few people actually started clapping, which surprised me. Patricia Chen was practically glowing as she made her way through the crowd toward me. But I only had eyes for two people. Dominic stood frozen on the stage, still gripping the microphone like it was a life preserver. His carefully styled hair was disheveled now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening air. This wasn't how his story was supposed to go. He was supposed to be the one walking away victorious, leaving his boring wife behind for his exciting new life. Camille looked even worse. She'd stumbled backward into a group of venture capitalists who were now eyeing her like she was radioactive. Her perfect composure had cracked completely, and she kept opening and closing her mouth like she wanted to speak, but couldn't form words. Maya. Dominic finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. He jumped down from the stage and grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Now. Oh, we're well past the talking stage, don't you think? I gently removed his hand from my arm. Besides, we have guests. This is insane. You can't destroy everything because you're upset about. Upset? I laughed, and the sound carried across the garden, making several conversations pause. Darling, I'm not upset. I'm strategic. David Kim, one of the biggest names in venture capital, approached us with obvious fascination. Maya, I have to say, this is the most interesting merger and acquisition story I've heard all year. Thank you, David. Though I prefer to think of it as a hostile takeover. He barked out a laugh. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Dominic, I have to ask, did you have any idea? Dominic looked like he wanted to disappear. This is all a misunderstanding. Maya's emotional. Actually, interrupted a voice from behind us. Everything Mrs. Richardson said can be verified. We turned to see Patricia Chen holding up her phone. I've just confirmed with the Hartwell Foundation's board of directors. The transfer of controlling interest was processed this morning at exactly 9:47 a.m. More gasps from the crowd. Someone whispered, "She filed the corporate papers before filing for divorce?" "Smart woman," another voice replied. I felt a warm glow of satisfaction. These people understood strategy when they saw it. Camille finally managed to push through the crowd toward us, her face flushed and desperate. This is ridiculous. You can't just steal our company because you're jealous. Steal? I raised an eyebrow. Camille, I literally funded your company. I'm the reason you have a company at all. If anything, you've been stealing from me. That's not. We didn't know. You didn't know that taking money from my joint accounts to fund your startup was theft? Really? I pulled out my phone and opened the banking app. Should I show everyone the transfer records? The ones where Dominic moved our money into NextGen accounts without my knowledge or consent. Dominic lunged for my phone, but I stepped back smoothly. No need to make this more embarrassing than it already is. Maya, please. His voice cracked. Can we just go inside and talk about this privately?
Why?
You didn't want privacy when you announced our divorce in front of 80 people. You didn't want privacy when you were planning to humiliate me at our own anniversary party. I looked around at our guests, who were watching this unfold like the world's most expensive reality show. I think transparency is exactly what we need right now. Sarah Martinez, a tech journalist who'd been quietly documenting everything on her phone, stepped forward. Maya, can you confirm the dollar amounts involved in the financial irregularities? Of course. I switched to my notes app, where I'd prepared all the relevant figures. $647,000 transferred from our joint savings account to NextGen operating expenses. Another $230,000 from our investment portfolio, liquidated without my knowledge. And approximately $180,000 in business expenses that were actually personal purchases for. I glanced at Camille, the company's co-founders. More than one person in the crowd whistled low. Jesus, Dom, muttered Jake Harrison, one of his old college friends. You really thought she wouldn't notice $1 million missing? It wasn't missing, Dominic said desperately. It was invested. In our future. Your future, I corrected. With her. I nodded toward Camille. A future that was going to be funded by my money while I got discarded like yesterday's news. The crowd was fully engaged now, watching this unfold like a masterclass in corporate warfare. Camille made one last desperate attempt. Look, maybe we can work something out. Some kind of partnership arrangement. Oh, we already have a partnership arrangement, I said sweetly. I'm the boss and you're fired. The words hit her like a physical blow. She actually staggered backward. Effective immediately, I continued. NextGen Analytics will be restructuring under new management. I'll be assuming the role of CEO, and we'll be pivoting to focus on supporting women entrepreneurs who've been underestimated or sidelined. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. You can't do this, Dominic said, but his voice had lost all its fight. Actually, Patricia said, still smiling, she absolutely can. The contracts are ironclad. I looked at my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not triumph exactly, but a kind of peace. Like I'd finally stopped holding my breath after 12 years. The real question, Dom, is what are going to do next? Because your name is about to become very interesting in Silicon Valley circles. The party began to wind down naturally after that. Some guests lingered, clearly hoping for more drama, but most had gotten their fill of entertainment for the evening. Several people approached me on their way out, business cards pressed into my hand, whispered invitations to lunch, genuine congratulations on what they called the play of the century. I accepted it all with grace, playing the perfect hostess even as my world fundamentally shifted around me. By 10 o'clock, only a few stragglers remained. Patricia was helping the catering staff clean up, occasionally shooting me proud glances like a teacher whose student had just aced the final exam. Camille had disappeared around 9:30, slipping out the back gate without saying goodbye to anyone. Smart girl. Her Silicon Valley career was effectively over, and she knew it. But Dominic? Dominic was still there, sitting alone at one of the white tables, staring at his phone like it held the answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. I walked over and sat down across from him. Up close, he looked older than his 42 years. The stress of the evening had carved new lines around his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was completely disheveled. That was quite a performance, he said without looking up. Thank you. I've been practicing. He finally raised his eyes to meet mine. How long have you known? About the affair? 3 months. About the money? 6 weeks. About my position with the Hartwell Foundation giving me control over your company. I smiled. That little revelation came to me about 2 weeks ago. Pure serendipity, really. Serendipity. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You destroyed my life by accident.
No, Dom.
You destroyed your life on purpose. I just expedited the consequences. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 12 years settling between us. I found myself remembering our first date, how nervous he'd been asking me out, how we talked until 3 a.m. about our dreams and fears and the companies we wanted to build together. I loved you, he said quietly. I want you to know that. What happened with Camille, it wasn't about not loving you. Then what was it about? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. You were too much. I blinked. Too much what? Too smart. Too successful. Too everything. He rubbed his face with both hands. When we met, I thought I could handle being with someone like you. But every day, in every meeting, every decision we made together, you were 3 steps ahead of me. And everyone could see it. The confession hit me like a physical blow. All these years, I'd thought I was supporting him, lifting him up. Instead, I'd been threatening him simply by existing. So you decided to make me smaller. I thought if you stepped back, if I could be the face of our success, then maybe. He shrugged helplessly. Maybe I could feel like the man in the relationship. And when that wasn't enough, you found someone who made you feel big? Camille looks at me like I'm brilliant, like I'm the smartest person in the room, because she doesn't know what I know. She doesn't see your flaws, your insecurities, The way you second-guess every major decision. She sees the performance, not the person. Maybe that's what I needed. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my emerald dress. Well, you're about to get a lot more of that. Because after tonight, performance is all you'll have left. Maya, wait. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. What happens now? With us, I mean. There's no us, Dom. You made that clear when you announced our divorce in front of 80 people. I picked up my clutch from the table. But since you asked, the divorce papers were filed this morning. My lawyer will be in touch about asset division, though I think you'll find that's going to be much simpler than you expected. What do you mean? I mean, most of our assets are either in my name or were used to fund NextGen without my consent, which means they're recoverable as stolen property. I smiled sweetly. Did you really think I'd spend 12 years managing our finances without protecting myself? His face went pale again. The house was purchased with money from my consulting firm. The cars, the investment accounts, even your beloved Tesla, all traceable back to income one generated or money I inherited from my grandmother. I paused at the garden gate. You might want to start apartment hunting. This is insane. You can't take everything. I'm not taking anything, Dom. I'm keeping what was already mine. I turned back to look at him one last time. The only thing I'm leaving behind is you. I walked through our house, my house, one final time, turning off lights and checking that everything was secure. In the morning, I'd be moving forward with a new company, a new mission, and a new life. But tonight, I wanted to savor this moment. The woman who had made herself small was gone forever. In her place stood someone I'd almost forgotten existed, Maya Richardson, the woman who never backed down from a fight, who built empires instead of tearing herself down for love. I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter and headed for the garage. There was a bottle of champagne chilling in my refrigerator, and I had some celebrating to do. Alone and exactly as I liked it. 6 months later, I stood backstage at the Women in Tech Leadership Conference in downtown San Francisco, adjusting the microphone clipped to my royal blue blazer. Through the curtains, I could hear the buzz of 800 women, entrepreneurs, investors, executives, all gathered to hear stories of triumph over adversity. My story had become something of a legend in Silicon Valley circles. Ladies and gentlemen, came the voice of the conference host. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Phoenix Ventures, Maya Richardson. The applause was thunderous as I walked onto the stage. The irony of the company name wasn't lost on me, rising from the ashes of my old life to become something entirely new and powerful. Thank you, I said, waiting for the applause to die down. 6 months ago, I was introduced at a party as Dominic Richardson's wife. Today, Forbes introduced me as one of the top 40 under 40 venture capitalists to watch. Funny how quickly things can change when you stop making yourself small. Laughter rippled through the audience. I'd learned to work a crowd, to command attention the way I'd once commanded boardrooms. But I'm not here to talk about revenge, though I know that's what some of you are expecting. I paused, scanning the sea of faces looking up at me. I'm here to talk about resurrection, about what happens when you stop funding other people's dreams and start investing in your own. Phoenix Ventures had launched 3 months after the anniversary party, with backing from the Hartwell Foundation and several high-profile investors who'd witnessed my hostile takeover firsthand. My reputation had preceded me. The woman who'd outmaneuvered Silicon Valley's golden boy had suddenly become very interesting to people with money to invest. Our first quarter results speak for themselves. I continued, clicking to the next slide. 12 investments, all in companies founded or co-founded by women. 8 of those companies have already seen significant growth, with 3 preparing for Series B funding rounds. What I didn't mention was that NextGen Analytics had folded within 2 months of my takeover. Not because I'd run it into the ground, but because I'd systematically poached every talented employee, dissolved the existing partnerships, and moved all the viable projects under the Phoenix Ventures umbrella. The technology Dominic and Camille had been so proud of, it now powered 3 different startups, all led by women who understood what it meant to be underestimated. The real transformation isn't just financial, I said, clicking to a photo of our latest company retreat. 20 brilliant women working on revolutionary technology. It's cultural. When you invest in people who've been counted out, you get results that defy every conventional metric. After my presentation, the questions came fast and enthusiastic. How did I identify undervalued companies? What was my due diligence process? Would Phoenix Ventures consider international expansion? But it was the last question that stopped me cold. "Ms. Richardson," said a young Black woman in the front row, "my grandmother always told me that revenge is a dish best served cold. But it sounds like yours was served at exactly the right temperature. Any advice for those of us still cooking?" The audience laughed, but I could see the serious intent behind her question. She wanted to know how to fight back, how to reclaim power when it had been stolen from her. "Don't cook revenge," I said finally. "Cook success. Make it so magnificent, so undeniable, that the people who tried to diminish you become irrelevant to your story." The applause was immediate and sustained. Later, at the networking reception, I found myself surrounded by women sharing their own stories of betrayal, dismissal, and resurrection. A biotech entrepreneur whose male co-founder had tried to edge her out after she developed their core technology. A software executive who'd been passed over for promotion 7 times before starting her own company. A brilliant engineer who'd been told she wasn't technical enough for leadership roles. I exchanged business cards, scheduled follow-up meetings, and felt that familiar thrill of recognizing potential that others had overlooked. My phone buzzed with a text message. For a split second, I wondered if it might be Dominic. He tried to reach out several times in the months after the divorce, usually when another story about Phoenix Ventures hit the tech blogs. But this was from Patricia Chen. "Saw your Forbes interview. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Drinks to celebrate." I was typing back my acceptance when another message came through, this one from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Camille. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know I'm launching a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for young women. Your story inspired me to stop running from my mistakes and start learning from them. Thank you." I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some chapters were meant to stay closed. As I drove home through the city lights, I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, quiet, supportive, making herself smaller so someone else could shine brighter. She felt like a stranger now, someone I'd known once but could barely remember. The woman behind the wheel of this car was different. She was Maya Richardson, venture capitalist. Maya Richardson, who turned underestimated women into unstoppable forces. Maya Richardson, who'd learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction, it was transformation. My phone rang through the car speakers. "Phoenix Ventures," Maya speaking. "Ms. Richardson? This is Elena Vasquez. I have a revolutionary idea for sustainable technology, but every investor I've pitched has told me I'm thinking too small." I smiled, pulling into my driveway, a sleek modern house in Pacific Heights that I'd bought with my own money, in my own name. "Elena," I said, "thinking too small is never going to be a problem at Phoenix Ventures. Tell me everything." Because the woman who'd once been told she was too much had finally found her place, investing in a world where too much was exactly what we needed.